Hi everyone, welcome back. Fall is here, we're having shorter days and colder nights. So today we're going to be answering some of your most frequently asked questions about how we prepare our fall gardens to ensure a bountiful harvest all winter long. Let's get into it. Do I need to amend my garden soil? We like to amend our soils in the fall because we grow a lot of heavy feeder crops in the summer. These are crops that uptake a lot of nitrogen out of the soil, such as tomatoes, melons, squash, and eggplants. We want to make sure that we replenish our soils in between the seasons because we also like to grow heavy feeder crops in the winter. These are things like broccoli, Brussels sprouts, cauliflower, and cabbages. By replenishing the soil in the fall before we plant those heavy feeding winter crops, we'll ensure that they have enough nutrients to thrive throughout the winter, and then we'll do the process again in the spring to get ready for the summer crops again. There are a few different ways to accomplish this. First and foremost, we have crop rotation. By using crop rotation, we are utilizing nitrogen-fixing plants. These are primarily legumes, so beans and peas, in place of our heavy feeder crops, which we discussed just a few seconds ago. So the way I have ensured our crop rotation in this dome is that I've placed these bamboo stakes where I once had tomato cages. This way we're fixing the nitrogen back into the soil. And I've planted our heavy feeding brassicas in areas where we had beans over the summer. And this ensures that all of our crops are getting rotated and have all of the nutrients they need for success. We have done some minimal amending of the soil in this dome, and that has been by the use of worm castings, as well as a well-rounded fertilizer mix. We like to use worm castings and/or compost in the spring and fall to help add organic matter back to the soil, which will naturally help to improve your NPK levels. And we like to use the well-rounded fertilizer mix just to give our seedlings a little bit of an extra boost as they're trying to get started. We haven't done a full deep dive into the soil composition of this dome yet because our soils are fairly new, but we will be doing that in the spring once our soils hit about their 1-year mark. So make sure that you're subscribed and turn on the notification bell so that you don't miss out on those future updates. What plants can I grow in an unheated growing dome over the winter? The types of crops that grow best in an unheated growing dome are those that are cold hardy. These include things like root crops, alliums, brassicas, leafy greens, and many different types of herbs with the exception of basil, and these all do really well in the winter months. You can start a lot of these seeds in late September, which is what we recommend, but this is going to depend on your average frost date in your area. So make sure that you consult the proper calendars and things so that you know exactly when to get started. So this is an example of what we would want our far northern growers' gardens to look like. So we have well-established cabbages, kales, we've got Brussels sprouts, we have direct sown turnips and potatoes, and we also have a succession of leafy greens. Whereas our more southern growers are going to have more of their heat-loving crops. So we still have some zucchinis and tomatoes and beans and things of that nature growing. A lot of these seeds can be started in trays, and this gives you a little bit of a head start. Or you can directly sow the seeds into the ground, and you'll definitely want to do that with your root crops. We like to utilize a vertical planting method when it comes to seasonal transitions. So here behind me, you can see we have a melon, which we have pruned heavily at the bottom to allow light to penetrate to our brassicas below. And here we have a cherry tomato, which I'm going to work on doing the same thing to. So we're going to start kind of pruning out these bottom branches so that we can open up some light to the plants below. This is the time of year where we start to say thank you and goodbye to a lot of our summer-loving crops that have started to slow down or have stopped production. Because we want to ensure as much light into the dome as possible, I've removed our cucumbers that have been on our west side because I really want to get as much daylight as I can into the dome. We want a minimum of about 10 hours of sunlight for our fall crops to get a good head start. Brassicas and root crops need a minimum of 6 to 8 hours of sunlight to grow, whereas our leafy greens only need about 3 to 6 hours. So it's really important that we get these brassicas in the ground so that they could get a nice healthy start because our growth is going to slow down significantly as winter approaches and our days start getting shorter. We want you to be harvesting all winter long, so that's why we need to get started now. As you can see, this tomato is still producing, and some of our customers actually leave their tomatoes in their domes up until the beginning of December. Just depends on how much the plant is producing. But we have gone ahead and thinned out the bottom so that we can open up this space for some of our fall crops. So we have leafy greens, we have some carrots sowed over here, kale, and we do have a basil, which is also still producing and has not gone to flower yet. but we'll be saying goodbye to this guy a little bit sooner than later. We urge you to plant in succession throughout the year, so we want to make sure that we have a constant supply of fresh produce. We planted these brassicas in mid-September, so we'll probably start another round now that we're in about mid-October. Because brassicas are something you typically only harvest from once. Our leafy greens will also keep planting in succession so that we have a constant supply. We like to space those out about a month at a time. This way, you can continue to harvest even when those days are shorter. Many customers choose to plant up to the beginning of December and then wait until the end of January, avoiding the weeks leading up to and following the winter solstice when the days just aren't long enough to encourage growth. It's also important to keep soil temperature in mind. Most of your winter crops are going to need between 35 and 50 degrees Fahrenheit to germinate. So here we have an example of succession planting. So we had our first group of carrots right here in this empty space. We've already harvested those and we've sown another succession. And then we have two more successions which are timed a few weeks apart from each other. This way we have those continual harvests all winter. Okay, that was a lot of information, so let's do a quick review. Up here in the front, we have spinach and chard. Those are some of our leafy greens. Then as you come over, we have some broccoli rabe and snowball cauliflower, which are brassicas. We have some more leafy greens here. We have some alliums with some bunching onions. We have a fennel plant, which is one of our winter herbs. And then we have carrots, which are a root crop. In the center here, we have a burgundy broccoli, which is, again, a brassica. We have another green broccoli, brassica. More bunching onions. We have celery, which also does really good in the dome over the winter. And then as you see up here, we have some of our green chilies, which are still producing, so we're letting them finish. But we have pruned up the bottoms significantly. And we also have some Romanesco and lettuces planted down here as well. We do still want to remember about our IPM, or integrated pest management. So we do plant trap crops throughout all seasons. Here we have a marigold, which will help us with aphids and whiteflies. What do I do if I didn't get started yet? If you haven't started your fall crops yet, don't panic. There are ways that you can work around these dates. You can utilize a grow light or a seedling heat mat to help jumpstart germination and create the succession planting that I was just speaking about. While it's not our preferred method, it does work. There's just a few extra steps you have to take. So you will need to make sure that you harden those crops off because your growing dome is not going to be as warm and cozy as a seedling heat mat, nor as bright as a grow light will be. So it does take a little bit more time to acclimate those crops to the growing dome so that they don't go into shock. The other thing that you can do is utilize row covers. This will help buy you an extra 5 to 10 degrees underneath of the row cover, and this will help you get those fall crops started if you're a little bit behind in planting, without needing any extra heat. Is there anything else I need to do in the fall to ensure a bountiful winter harvest? Some other things that you'll want to consider this fall before going into the winter season are things like plant spacing. Primarily that we want to prevent any plant leaves from pressing up against the polycarbonate. The growing dome is on average 20 to 30 degrees warmer than the outside ambient temperatures, meaning that the growing dome does condensate in the wintertime. By preventing the plant leaves from pressing up against the poly, we're going to avoid the potential for freezing and wilting leaves, as well as diseases like powdery mildew, which tend to happen when we have excess condensation and humidity. Late September and the beginning of October is a great time to take down your shade cloth. Remember that the sun is not only helping your plants grow, but it is also literally powering your growing dome greenhouse, mainly by heating up the above ground pond. This is also a great time to remove any plants that you have in front of your pond that are either tall, or if you have movable pots, you could just move them away from the pond. That way we are getting as much sunlight absorbed into that pond throughout the day to prevent any major temperature swings at night. This is also the time of year to start thinking about disengaging your vents, retying your restraining cords, and adding insulation to your fans. But you will want to wait until your outside temperatures have cooled off pretty significantly. That way you're still able to get proper airflow and circulation throughout your greenhouse during the warmer days. With these simple tips and tricks, you should be able to have bountiful harvests all winter long. These time frames are all based on the southern Rocky Mountains here in Colorado, so you may need to make some adjustments based on your climate. Our far northern growers will want to get started on these things a little bit sooner, and those of you in the southern United States will want to start a little bit later on these types of things. All of these tips have been things that we have learned over the last 30 years, and they have worked well for us, but we're always learning new things from you guys. So if you have anything that has worked well for you, please share and leave it in the comment section down below. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you soon.